Okay, welcome back, everybody, in the street fight politics universe. Uh, News continues unabated. It's beyond head spinning at this point. We have lots to talk about. And so, Christine, why don't you take the lead on this? Because it's more important that your age group gets in on this than mine.
Well, all right then. Like Ed said, there has been a head-spinning amount of news going on this week, and can be kind of hard to keep track of, but I think we've got some highlights. There's the Zohran Mamdani win for the mayoral primary in New York City. So there's been a lot of buzz, both positive and negative, surrounding that. We want to talk about the big ugly bill. They voted for cloture last night, so now they can actually vote on the bill itself. And as usual, Lisa Murkowski showed very little intestinal fortitude and ultimately rolled over. So we'll get into that. And then we need to talk about what's going on in Idaho, as well as fires in California. So I guess we could start with Zohran Mamdani. What do you think, Ed? Were you expecting Cuomo to take it home, or
No, actually,
what did you think?
I've been around long enough that you can sense momentum, and the optics of what was showing up with Mamdani, and the fact that Cuomo actually has a lot of baggage he's trying to drag along. And, it really did not surprise me. And the thing is, I've sort of like, an advisory council to two congressmen here. I mean, one's a congressman, one's running for Congress. And I told them point blank, you do not ignore his win. I mean, it's like the thing that really should grab your attention is not what the MAGA Republicans are saying about him. It's what the Democratic establishment is saying about him.
Yeah. No, you nailed it. It's almost like, with friends like these, who needs enemies? They are very threatened by what's going on here. And what I've heard some people describe it as is simply generational change. And I definitely think that that's it to a certain extent. But I also think it's hinting at this rift between the Democratic base and the establishment Democrats and the donor class.
Absolutely. I've been pushing this narrative for quite some time that the James Carvilles of the world need to just get fuck out of the way, to use a nice political term that our president is allowing us to use now. And we need to make way for the AOCs, the Jasmine Crockett's, the David Hogues. There's a whole generation, and now, Mamdani. And, when you look at the stuff that he's saying, it's not radical in terms of, we're not talking about, some Stalinist plan for America. This is that, if we're going to be paying taxes to the government, we want that stuff coming back to benefit us and not to benefit, the oil companies and, the billionaires who are soaking the world right now. And, I look at some of the stuff that Mamdani is pushing. I think that, you're getting out into, they don't even do some of the things he's calling for in true socialist countries. And so, I'm hoping that, you get the idea that, no, you cannot have state-run grocery stores. That does not work.
But I don't think that he's suggesting that in the same way that we think of like a North Korean state-run grocery store. Well, like those are fake, or even like a Russian grocery store during the Soviet era. Like what he's trying to address is food deserts. He's not trying to put anybody out of business. He's just trying to make sure people have somewhere inexpensive to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. And I mean, frankly, like if they're going to be paying for WIC anyway, or paying for SNAP and stuff anyway, instead of them having to go to the bodega and buy, dry noodles and stuff like that, if they have a place that they can go and get fresh food, like, I'm all for that. I don't see it as something that's going to like put Trader Joe's out of business or be like, any threat to there being
Well, that's where he's going to
supermarkets.
need to explain himself better in my mind. That, if you're talking, I mean, we subsidize businesses all through the economy. I mean, my God, Boeing wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the billions of subsidies we give them. So, if you're talking about, well, we want to subsidize, a private company, so that we, they're telling us they will lose money if they set up shop here. We want you to set up shop. We will give you a subsidy, so that, you can come in and, take care of this food desert and, do good, and who knows, maybe the fact that, we kickstart it, it takes off and you won't need subsidies after a while. That it will
Yeah.
actually be something that's good because there's obviously demand there.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. And when you think about it, there's all these different ways that the government distributes food through third parties. So I don't think, it's that different than having a Meals on Wheels or having like a school lunch program or something like that, where there is, somebody coming in, preparing food or procuring food, and it's being provided as a service to people. I mean, I don't know. I'm not scared of that at all. Like it doesn't freak me out because I don't think he's trying to drain money out of New York City. The thing is that New York City's got money. They're always going to have money. Wall Street is there. Like, some of our most important cultural institutions are there. So, maybe it's not what it was 10 years ago, but everything ebbs and flows. And New York's never really going away. So why not take some of that money that flows through there and just make the city nice for people who live there? And that's what I want to see more of. The city should be for New Yorkers first and foremost. And, New Yorkers have paid far too much for far too long for nothing. And I mean, look at that thing that pissed everybody off. They did that tax, the surge pricing on the roads where you had to pay an extra toll.
A problem with that. I mean,
really?
No, not at all.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it's great. I wish that, we would do that with the HOV lanes here in Phoenix. It's like, if I want to, and not cheaply, it's like, if I want to pay $15 to use the HOV lane, for 10 minutes, you can soak me and I'm, if I have something that, is that important, I'm happy to pay it.
Yeah.
And so that gets money in there. You can, it's a revenue source. I think that, it's a common good that, I think that we can exploit for everybody's good. And it's like, well, that's not fair. That's only the rich people are going to use it. Well, better to do that so that you do bring in some revenue, and it's easy to do. I mean, it's like every time I go to California, they've got the little tags on the front of your windshield, and you just roll through and it automatically clips your account.
Yeah.
You can do that. As far as that surge pricing, I mean, there were some issues that needed to be worked out, but it's like, I get it. There's some guy that is going to have to pay $15 to go to his house because it's one block on the other side of the line. So, there was things that you could do to take care of that.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
those birthing issues take time, but you get it done. But the places they've done that have made the cities far more livable. Instead of having these traffic choke areas, it's like, you go to London and Old London. It was a very specific part of London, and actually, Old London is not London, so it's like one of those leftovers from 1,000 years ago. But it's also the touristy part, and taking the cars out actually made it so that it was became far more walkable and usable.
Yeah, it's people scaled instead of car scaled or vehicle scaled. And New York City is a perfect city to do that. And I think that this is the sign of a promising trend. I know a lot of people are very concerned because of this whole globalize the Intifada scandal that's happening. And I'd really like to debunk some of the rhetoric that has been swirling around that. I think that in this country, unfortunately, we've gotten far too comfortable with labeling any words that just happen to be Arab as scary. And the word intifada just means uprising. Now, I think that there is a connotation
Sort of like what
where
happened in Boston in 1770 or so.
Exactly. Or I mean, or even the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, where people who are being oppressed or colonized or otherwise abused by an authority are rising up and they're fighting back. And go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that I agree with that, and I think part of that is very easy to demonize anybody that's Arab, because if you're a Muslim, you're automatically the next Ayatollah Khomeini, and putting out fatwas against, U.S. presidents.
Yeah.
Although with this one, it's like, damn, it's like sort of conflicted.
Yeah, for once, but I hear that. And, I think that the way that Zoran has kind of handled this whole, first of all, he didn't take the bait. They keep saying denounce it, denounce it, denounce it. Well, you know what happened when we told everybody to denounce Hamas? They would denounce it 100 times, and then they don't listen to anything that you say after that anyway. So he didn't take the bait. He said, this is not language that I use, and I'm going to protect all New Yorkers, Jewish New Yorkers. I'm going to protect everybody. I care about them. And he also said that, as a Muslim, he feels that his safety and, success and the safety and success of the Muslim people are tied to the safety and success of the Jewish community. Like, he sees, both of their liberation as connected. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that's where he's coming from.
And that also makes him all the more dangerous in the eyes of MAGA Republicans, because if he succeeds with that language and getting, a political support and a political base, it's like right now in New York City, from what I read, there's like 960,000 Jews of various stripes of, conservatism versus, Orthodox, non-Orthodox. And there are now close to 900,000 people that are Muslim or Arab. And so, you now in this situation where one group is coming up to, parity, and probably soon to eclipse them, as far as, being a voting bloc. And so, it's, times be a changing.
Yeah, they are changing. And, frankly, I think that it's very cynical when the media will use anti-Semitism to silence, or they use the accusation of anti-Semitism as a way to silence dissent. Because I also think that's very, for the Jewish community, I could imagine if you are constantly being told every day that everything is anti-Semitic and everyone is after you, that makes you incredibly uncomfortable. So I just feel like it's just time to move on from that and to really look at things from a critical perspective and not get too much in a moral panic over certain phrases that have sort of ambiguous origins that might not be as scary as people are making them sound.
Well, that's certainly, when you're sitting around, doing hothouse politics, drinking coffee and, trying to solve the world problem. Yeah, that's great. But there's also the real world realities of politics that if it can be used as a weapon, it's going to be. So, that's not going to go away. But, that's going to be, to me, the interesting thing to see how he does handle all this, because right now he's plowing new ground, for Democrats, progressive, liberals, people that are at least left of center, for everybody, and which is the message I took back, to the people I'm advising. It's like, don't look at this as a one-off or something that, they snuck something by everybody. The guy had 50,000 volunteers.
He did, and an excellent phone list, I've heard. There's rumors that he may have gotten AOC's phone list because he got his phone banking game, a lot of people say, was a big part of his win.
Yeah, and so, to have somebody that finally is coming in that is young and, giving out things that are ideas that actually help people. And again, it's like he's talking about, well, we're just going to make it so the buses are just free. Good.
Yeah.
And it's like, everything else in transportation is subsidized. We just don't call it that. It's like you look at, the most heavily subsidized mode of transportation are roads and cars.
Yep.
But it does not ever get looked at like this. Well, it's you lose money every time you have a train or, you have a bus. Well, when you really look at the actual true expense of what it costs to drive a mile any place, so, a mile of interstate is coming up on $100 million to build. $100 million, I think, is going to build a lot more than a mile of train track.
Yeah.
So I look at those as arguments that can, that we need to start pushing back on, aggressively. That, we need multiple modes of, I'm not saying take away cars. We're not doing that. But, it would be nice if we had, some real choice in the matter. And, we weren't beholden to, the airline lobbies and everybody else, when we could have a train system that works. And, we have intercity transport that works, that you do not have to own a car. You can get around.
I mean, it improves everyone's quality of life. It improves productivity. Like, your city is going to make more money if people can get places to shop and work more easily. I mean, it's just,
it's an investment in society. It's very easy to demagogic saying, well, this is socialism. And it's like, no, it's something that's for the common good. Right now, if we were to try to build the interstate system starting from scratch right now, we would not do it. Because but I think we beat this to death for today. So why don't you start talking about this big bad bill and just how bad it is.
It's so bad. That's why I was like, why don't we just stay on this Zoran win for a minute, so we can bask in our success. But I guess we do have to talk about this bill. So
you think it's going to pass?
I am not sure. I don't think it's going to pass before the 4th of July. I mean, ultimately, they're gonna threaten somebody's child. They're gonna find somebody's laptop to blackmail them with, and they're gonna get enough votes one way or another. They may not be able.
Is there another Tom Tillis out there?
I mean, yeah, there's Tom Tillis situation, but I mean, maybe Lisa Murkowski, who has been doing this whole tiniest violin in the world sympathy tour, where she goes and does her town hall and she tells her constituents she's afraid. We're all afraid. Then she says she's flirting with becoming a Democrat. She's not a MAGA Republican, and all of this other stuff. But at the end of the day, she keeps voting with them. And this time she voted for cloture so that she could get a carve out for her state. And then the Senate parliamentarians struck that down and said, no. Something like that is going to require 60 votes. You can't do that on reconciliation. So now it's looking like Lisa Murkowski could be out, unless, of course, she's scared. again, and she just votes with them because I don't know, because she's scared. And to that, I just say, like, how do you think your constituents feel? How do you think the American people feel? You're a United States senator. Van Hollen got on a plane and went to El Salvador to CCOT to go, get proof of life for Obrego Garcia. And you can't bring yourself to hit the no button instead of the yes button because you're so scared. I have no patience for her. I hope somebody primaries her. I don't know what to do with her, but
Well,
it's
yes,
like,
I thought she's got 5 more years.
oh God.
Yeah, so I mean, which is what I don't get is like, you're safe. Trump's going to be gone by then. And it's like, when you game these things out, political gaming, the strongest thing you can do is to go 180 degrees and get back in Trump's face. Now, I mean, yes, you're going to have the maggots like coming out of the woodwork, but they're not the only voters.
Yeah, they're not. They're not. And I do feel like that contingent is dwindling. We had a lot of people who were older. It's been 9 years since 2016. I bet, sadly, a lot of those people might not be with us anymore. They might not be active politically anymore. And yeah, you have, a very vocal, group of younger conservatives that is sort of coming up, but I don't think they're actually larger in numbers. I think that they're just more engaged. And why are people who are opposed to that disengaged? Because the Democrats have been like, kind of like floppy fish, like,
Well,
very, very spineless.
that's the Chuck Schumer conundrum, is that, they're, in Washington, D.C., they're corporate Democrats. They send strongly worded letters. Instead, yeah, I know. It's like every time I say that, I want to hit something. So,
I mean, they're disgraceful. No, like it really just is like, if I could turn back time or have a crystal ball to shove in Chuck Schumer's face the first time that he's like, no, actually, like, we should let the bill, go to cloture or whatever it was that he decided, because if we shut down the government, oh boy, you wait and see what happens.
Shut it down. Do it.
Yeah, God, I would give anything at this point. Just shut it down for a few days. I mean,
the thing is, this is, they'll do everything in their power. It's like that scene in Terminator movie where, they throw the T2 and the acid bat and it's splashing around as it dies. I mean, that's what's going to happen here. But, to tangent off of that idea, how much do we let the MAGA Republicans in Western North Carolina and South Carolina and FEMA, adjacent areas that are going to get killed, the next time a hurricane comes through or a flood comes through? I mean, FEMA's out of money.
Yeah, they are out of money. And I never believe in collective punishment. And I don't believe in retributive justice as a principle. I mean, it may be a little bit like, maybe paying a fine here or there or something like that. But I don't believe that, we seek retribution. And I don't think we punish everybody for the actions of a few. We know those states are gerrymandered. They play games with the votes. It's very likely that a lot of people living in those states are not MAGA Republicans at all. But,
I disagree with that from this standpoint. It's not about retribution. It's about sometimes you have to take a 2x4 and smack them over the head to get their attention. And I think that's what it's going to take, because the stories I've read, I mean, you go out to Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, where these farmers are getting literally taken to the edge of financial devastation. Yeah. And 90% of them voted for Trump. And it's like, hey, why are you doing this? But, it's like, yeah, I know why I voted for Trump, because, it's a lot of the good stuff he was going to do. And it's like, well, maybe, self-preservation should have been at the top of your list there, because he told you he was going to do this.
They're just not informed, though. That's
They're
the
informed.
thing. I don't know, though, because like the editorialization of the facts, depending on what news outlets you're listening to, is so real. And like a lot of people are not plugged into politics to begin with, except for maybe around the election. So a lot of time they're getting secondhand information that some guy heard on talk radio from, so it's, I think that there's a huge problem with media literacy, and that, just like they're spinning this bill, like I bug my grandma's congressperson all the time. I have a Democratic congressperson. She is a Republican. And I call on her behalf because she's 90 and I'm, feistier than her. And they send me their newsletter. In their newsletter, they have infographics that they create that are just full of shit. Like they're complete lies. And but they put like a little statistic on there. They massaged those numbers really good and they phrased it in such a way that it's not a lie. But if you're somebody that reads data, what they're saying ain't all that great. So it's, they do trick people. And I don't want to give the farmers a pass totally, because there's layers and layers to what's going on, in agriculture and stuff. And, they are complicit in a lot of the issues that we are having. And I don't know what we can do to get them to stop voting against their interests so often.
It's going to take
a 2x4.
Yeah. Get serious about that. I mean, it's like, there's the grain farmers that have lost China was buying almost all soybeans, wheat, corn, milk, sorghum. We have all this stuff that we were producing has no market.
No market.
It's like we have more than enough grain for ourselves here, but where's it going to go now?
Yeah.
Because it goes to China, it's a fairly direct route. If you try to get it to places like Egypt and, South Saharan Africa, that's a long trip.
It is.
And they can't pay. A lot of them can't pay for it. You're basically, it's USDA, paid by the government to have it shipped over there to give away.
Yep. Yeah. And also like WIC and all of those programs that they're so desperately trying to gut were also ways that the government was able to subsidize some of these farm products. Yeah. And, it's interesting because I was listening to a farmer lady talking about some of the problems in agriculture. And she was saying, first of all, that most of the farmers that we're talking about are millionaires. They have generational wealth, they inherited farmland. And, so they're not, it's not like serf farmers or peasants. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that part of the reason why they have these huge single crops is because that is cheap and easy to do. Now, if they were to like diversify and start, growing, a lot more variety of different foods, it's a lot more trouble for them to have to do that. So in some ways, like sort of like practices to make farming as efficient as possible to produce this surplus that we have to give away because it's convenient for farmers actually hurts our food supply. So it's like there's all these layers to what's going on here.
Hey, welcome, Louie. Glad to see you come in. We started out talking about the New York City mayor's election with Mondani. So, if you've got something you want to add into that, please do. Now we're talking about, the big, bad, beautiful bill, or, whatever you want to call it. And, we got onto the topic of just how bad you have to have MAGA Americans get hit. And so we've got a little bit of disagreement. I'm of the take a 2x4 and smack it in their forehead to get their attention crowd. And, when something goes wrong, don't expect us to bail them out. And, Christine is being, a kinder soul.
Well, no, I think so. Both of those topics actually I've been dealing with today in one way, shape, or form. the election's interesting in New York, and get to that in a second. But the bill, you already have, Senator Tillis, who's not running for reelection, North Carolina senator, which is a huge, that's huge. Tillis has always been somebody that is always very well respected from North Carolina. He was at a breakfast that I attended recently and spoke to a whole room of clients that we have, and he hinted at this. By the way, he hinted at it in the breakfast, and I remember walking out of that breakfast, and this was in the U.S. Senate building. It was in one of the little committee rooms they have, so it was somewhat of an intimate setting, and you got to talk to him. And I remember getting this sense in my head, thinking like, the guy's going to vote no on the bill. I kind of just figured it out based on the comments he was making. So it doesn't surprise me that he's voting no. But what surprises me is that one decision, he was willing to realize the consequences of it. He won't be reelected. I mean, there's no way.
He wouldn't get through the Republican primary.
Not the primary, exactly. The primary, exactly. He wouldn't. They're going to primary him. It's a grueling process. They're going to, do all of these hit pieces and bring up items in the past. I mean, it's just not worth to put your family through that, I think was his calculation. And he's a good guy. But, I think when you're talking about like the effects of the bill, I really don't think a lot of these people that are voting for it actually even care. They know it. Their staff, of course, their staff and their attorneys, and they know the hit to the deficit and all that. They know all that stuff. People off Medicaid. I just don't think they care. I really don't think they do. I mean, that's my take on it. Politically speaking, they would rather have a victory and stay together than vote against it. And also, unfortunately, I know a lot of these people, it sounds horrible, but they would rather get this over with and go home for the holiday. And that's how a lot of these, do you think they really liked getting pulled in there on the weekend, voting till midnight? No, they don't want to do that. I mean, a lot of them are just, all right, here's my vote, I'm gone. And they hop on an airplane and go home. I'm serious. That's how they do these things. So I don't think they care. Most of them. I really don't.
That's a really cool take to have. I mean, one that, you have to be on the ground to be able to pick up. And, to pick up Tillis's tell, he's probably a crappy poker player. So.
he was talking to a group of realtors that were there, and he from North Carolina. They're all from North Carolina. The whole room was all his constituents, and he's very popular. And that goes to, but where I'm going with this is that for the most part, you take a state like North Carolina, it's relatively moderate. I mean, it can kind of go either, way. And he represents that kind of viewpoint. And I can see some of these states, and I can see some of these senators getting just demolished in the midterms when the Senate is up again. And I really think this is going to come back to really, really bite them. And I really do think the Democrats are they're going to take back the House and the Senate, probably not by a large margin. I don't think it's going to be some crazy wave and all that. It never is. But I think they're going to take it back. To me, it's just that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that they want to find the craziest, farthest to the right MAGA extremists they can find, and that makes it very easy to run to them. It's like, right. You don't have to move to the left. You just have to be just, someplace to the left of where they are, and you're fine.
And you're fine, exactly. And 2 years down the road, when a lot of these, because they're doing the cuts now, but they don't take effect until 2 or 3 years from now. So you're not going to really see a lot of the effects until that, they put provisions in there that, they're going to defund this and defund that, but then it's like a temporary extension for a while, So they engineered that into the bill. So when you start seeing these people getting kicked off of Medicaid and a lot of these programs shutting down, that's when I think people are going to start realizing, their seats are at risk.
I think they're realizing it now.
Well, they know it. I don't think they're dumb. I mean, but I just don't think they care. I mean,
it's like, true. And I don't know how they're related, but they are. So.
I've got a hot take on Tillis. I don't think he was trying to hide it, that he was about to retire. He might be putting feelers out for a new job.
Wouldn't be surprised.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dropping like a few hints in a friendly setting, and maybe opportunities arise.
What's the saying? The joke around the Senate, is like, every senator wakes up in the morning, puts on their tie, and sees himself as president. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Who knows? I mean, it makes sense. Or governor. I mean, but yeah.
Well, I could see, him doing that, running for governor. So,
right.
We've got that going on in Arizona right now with Andy. And, it's like the whole slew of people coming out.
Arizona is going to be a very close race. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Republican wins the governorship, actually. And I know I shouldn't say that, but I really, just from what I'm hearing and seeing in the polls, and yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Well, I mean, so let's circle back to New York. I mean, what's your take on Mondani?
I think it could have been anybody that would have. I don't think it's, I don't. This is my. I've always told Democrats this: don't get excited with victories. You got to understand that. Look at the alternatives. Look at the people that were running in the race. I think the electorate didn't necessarily vote for that kind of political dynamic. I think they just voted for someone they felt can win and focus on economic issues and issues that make sense to people that are in New York. There was one question I remember watching the debates, and they asked the candidates, like, where would your first trip be, essentially, when you win, if you're the mayor? And all of them said, like, Israel or somewhere overseas. And the guy gave the perfect answer as a candidate. He's like a perfect politician. He said, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay here in New York. People voted for that. It's simple economics, man. I tell people this all the time when you run for office. Like, it's so simple. Nobody cares about your platform to a degree. It's just so bread and butter pothole type issues in that level in the mayorship that's how you win elections. And I think
that's always been my thing. Potholes don't come with a political label. They're just holes that need to be filled in.
Correct. Exactly. Potholes and speed bumps, man. I mean, it's so simple. And I think he's a very talented candidate. And I think he did very well because of that. So, and I'm not taking anything away from, his candidacy. I'm just saying, when you look at the alternatives, I mean, it's the same tired playbook, and that's why people said, okay, we're going to vote for something different here. Almost like an Obama-ish type of candidacy, I thought.
Yeah, you know what? I actually, now that you said that, and I didn't put my finger on it before, and I don't know if it had something to do too with like the art and like the aesthetic of the campaign, where they used, kind of nice, bold colors, little bit of like a retro font sort of thing. Like it kind of reminds me of that Obama Change poster that was so popular for so long, but I hear what you're saying on that.
And if you heard some of his like proposals, I mean, they're, to someone just looking in from the outside, they're pretty left, right? I mean, free this, free that kind of a thing. But people don't care, just like they didn't care about what the right was saying when Trump won. They just want to know, can they afford stuff? Can they send their kids to school? Can they buy eggs that are affordable and all those types of things? It literally comes back to
I heard something interesting today, that Canada, which uses the same sources of chickens and feed and all that stuff, their eggs are half to a third of the price of eggs here in the US. And it's like, that's interesting. Why is that?
I don't know.
Price gouging. They always got to build in a little for them. Every time that there's something inflationary goes on, they always build in their little bit of an extra. I mean, during COVID, there was lots of like exposés about the earnings calls for all of these companies, where they're like, customers are used to the prices getting hiked up, so we just hiked them up a little more this quarter. So, they're feckless.
I was talking to someone the other day, like they were, it was one of my hockey buddies. Yeah. And he was telling me like, I can't wait for eggs and milk and all these things to go back down. I'm like, they're never, once they go up, they ain't going to go back to what they, I mean, you know, why would they? Why would they?
And I mean, how much eggs and milk is he buying at the end of the day? Like, you know, like, I mean, no, it's crazy. But I see what you're saying about the kitchen table issues,
So
and
simple.
it is. And I think also too, people are tired of the culture war. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are still, you know, ready to fight because they're bored or whatever, but most of us aren't bored, we're broke.
Exactly.
You know, like,
I think it comes down to the fact that our Hispanic trans chicken workers are no longer there to harvest the eggs. So,
well,
you know, be facetious, but I'm thinking that may have something to add into it, because it's like there are whole plants in Nebraska and Iowa that, you know, process pigs and chickens that are totally shut down right now.
Mm-hmm.
Shut down.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, that is true. Even if you go to like, I mean, you could just see it. Even if you go to like, you know, Costco or Sam's or whatever, or wherever you go. I mean, even Safeway. I mean, the prices. Yeah, no, it's definitely more expensive now to buy food and groceries. It is no joke. I mean, it definitely does affect people. I mean, think about if you were, what was the figure I read the other day? To like a young couple in some states, you have to be earning $230,000 just to afford a house, to buy into a house. I mean, think about that for a second. That's
That's a mind.
100%. Yeah, no, we are a 6-figure household, and we are renters in, you know, in Florida, which is not even like the most expensive state. It's impossible. How can you come up with 30% of something that's $600,000?
coming up
You
with
know, like, that's kind of hard, you know, when, like, there's a lot of bills, things are expensive. And if this bill passes, electricity is going up 30%.
30%.
30%.
the bill will, I'm pretty sure, is going to pass. I have no reason to say it won't. I mean, that's, you know, I definitely think the bill is going to pass. I have no doubts about that in my head. But it's unfortunate because, yeah, it sets the course of the future for just the deficits and debt. I mean, it's like the average person understand it would be like, it's like using your credit cards to pay your car payment and electricity, and you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and
Well,
doing it.
okay, that's a good point. I want to actually dive into that, because there's a scam going on with us borrowing, and what it is that instead of raising taxes, especially on the wealthiest in society, we let them off the hook and replace what they would have been paying by borrowing money, thereby taking the onus to repay it back on my kids and grandkids, and, you know, shoving it down the line,
Mm-hmm.
you know, instead of paying as you go. So I look at it as, you know, what's the morality behind doing that? You know, it's like, you know, what are we saying about society when, you know, we're going to burden, you know, the people that come after us? You know, I mean, is that all right to do that? Do we not, you know, have some obligation to those that come after us? No, it looks like, you know, the answer is no.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think a lot of these people that are voting for this don't see it from that lens. Obviously, it's an obvious statement, I know, but what I really mean by that is when you start to talk to these people in their offices and you really get a sense of how they think, it's kind of like they're speaking a different language almost. You know, they don't see it as a moral issue. Is kind of the simple way to say it. It's to them, it's like um, they're doing it in the name of, like, in their head, like mission driven efficiency, and this is the right thing to do, and the country's on the right track, and we got to make it right, and we're doing the right thing no matter what pain.
I think it's more, a lot of these people are billionaires waiting to happen. So
I mean,
when they're a billionaire, they don't want to pay taxes either. So, and that's, I think that's literally driving a lot of this.
I think money drives everything, exactly. And even the Democrats, I mean, look at Pelosi. She's one of the most wealthiest people in Congress. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans are like motivated by money. I think everybody is, right? And I just think on the right, it's a little bit more blatantly, they just don't care, you know? They're going to
Oh,
put it
yeah,
either way.
they stopped trying to hide it. It's like this.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody like Nancy Pelosi, because, she has so much power already. And now she's not even the Speaker of the House. She's just a regular congressperson. She's not the, minority leader or anything. And she's, a millionaire. She's got hundreds of millions of dollars. And she's almost 90 years old. So it's, why does she need to stay? And I think honestly, with some of them, it's hubris because they think, oh, I'm the only one that can do this. It can only be me, that can make sure that my district stays afloat or something like that. Like it's, like they don't have, I guess, enough respect for other people to think that they could also do a good job at this and that they could just sort of like bow out and do their own thing. But I think, maybe the incentive structure that we have right now because of all this money in politics has made it so the people that stick around are the ones with the undesirable intentions for having office, like, whatever those reasons are, some of them, maybe it's bribery, maybe it's power, maybe it's blackmail, maybe it's just because they're like a nihilist, like a George Santos or somebody like that, where you can't even figure it out. So
well, I think we're going to have a conversation about how much money and what percentage of the nation's wealth can be amassed by one person. Because I look at it as really, really dangerous that we've got some guy that thinks that we're going to take, close to $500 billion worth of capital. And because, he in theory controls it, then we're going to spend it on going to Mars. That's not a decision one guy gets to make. If you want to get on a freaking raft and you're in Polynesia and sail over to South America, it's only you.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about something that is, a phenomenal part of the world economy.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really brought it to the fore this past weekend was a billionaire who's able to rent the entire city of Venice.
Oh my God.
I mean,
yeah, no, it's wild. I mean,
they rented every hotel room for the entire week, even if they didn't have anybody staying there. Paid all the restaurants. No tourists were allowed on the island while they were doing, the nuptials. And it only cost $50 million, which is to me almost ridiculously cheap. You'd figure it'd be more expensive to rent out Venice.
Why don't we have some benevolent billionaires buying some school boards or city councils for us? I mean, let's start small. I don't even think you need 50 million for that.
Well, in the past, you had the John D. Rockefellers and Andrew Carnegie's that actually, wanted to get into heaven. So they did try to buy their way building libraries and universities and stuff like that. These guys don't.
You know what, though? I think part of it is, though, too, is that maybe being like further back in the past, in the 1800s, you're a little bit closer to like the Revolutionary War. And like you still have that like understanding of like what it's like to live under a monarchy, and under like the whim of a king and, having all that inequality. So it probably they still, even though they were so rich, probably just had like a visceral distaste for it because it just wasn't what was in, now like a lot of time has elapsed and, democracy has been hard, it's been difficult. It's been work for us to do. So now, of course, rich people are just like, yeah, nobody remembers like what it used to be like before. And, they probably wouldn't mind having a king and that would just be easier for me. But I feel like, we just don't have that embarrassment anymore because we've been worshiping rich people for too long.
Yeah, there's no there's no frame of reference to the past because the past becomes blurred by time. I mean, it happens throughout history, right? I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I mean, it's like you see this with all the stuff with women's rights that, my generation were the ones, out there getting Ms. Magazine and throwing their bras away, and all that stuff. The millennials and especially Gen Alpha and the younger Gen X really weren't part of it.
Right.
I say they didn't see that sacrifice.
Right. They didn't.
Yeah.
Correct. It's true. It's like, I remember I used to work with this one lady who I used to work at a university, and I had an office next to this one lady, and we'd always talk. And she at the time was in her, I want to say maybe probably her 60s or something like that. I must have been in my early 30s, maybe late 20s, right? And I remember we used to talk a lot because she remembers, and we used to talk about this. She remembers being a kid, like a little girl, she said, and she would witness the Nazi tanks. She was from Germany. The Nazi tanks rolling through some of their cities, and she said, I can remember like the squeaking of the wheels and the metal and the gun turrets and the soldiers coming off, looking for people. And it hit me like I didn't have any frame of reference for that. But yet here's a woman sitting next to me who does. No wonder why she turns off the lights when she leaves the office. No wonder why she is very, very like conservative what she brings to lunch, because she's not used to having anything and she's used to living in that environment. So to your point, like it didn't make me a bad person, right, for not being able to understand that, but it made me realize there's a lot of people that can become bad people if they don't understand that past and what other people have went through. So it's
if tanks rolling through the streets, let's the over under on the amount of time before we start seeing tanks rolling down our own streets, not in a parade.
I don't know about that, but yeah, that's a whole. I wish I. In what context? I guess in
martial law.
Oh, geez, I don't know. Probably disguised under a different reasoning or phrase. I can see it happening. Sure.
Well, what about what happened in Idaho? This past couple of days, where you have a guy setting fires to lure first responders in, and then he starts killing them.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that vaguely. Yeah.
Horrible.
Or the people dressing up as ICE agents.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, right? I mean, it's the same. You don't know who is who anymore, and it's. I mean,
it's like that's the thing is I'm starting to see calls from very reasonable people that. If somebody comes up to you and they've got a mask on and they're not marked as police and they don't identify themselves, shoot them.
I mean, frankly, it's only going to take one or two of those things to happen for maybe those ICE agents to decide not to wear the masks anymore.
Well, I agree.
I'm looking at it as I'm going to take one or two of those where to protect the public nationwide, Trump uses that as the excuse to declare martial law.
Yeah, I could. I mean, sure, I could see something like that happening. Yeah, and the crazy thing about this is, think about it. Like, you got that going on, and then you got Iran. You got this bill. You got all right. This is just like almost overload for the system. I don't think the system. I don't know if the system can handle it, but I will say that if there is any one time that it would break, it'd be under these stresses.
Yeah, you'd like to have somebody that's not demented in charge.
That's just that's the beginning, right? That's, check box number one, right? And the leader is normal, but.
I think that from my standpoint as a doc, it's getting almost impossible to hide what's going on with him physically and mentally.
Trump, you're talking about. Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You mean like health wise, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. No, people are talking about like discolorations and things on his hands and all that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but it does seem a little strange, right? I mean, he's wearing like diapers, I think, now. And
there's sources that are pretty reliable. His diaper has a catheter, which is why his suits are so bulky, because he needs stuff to be able to hide all that stuff. But I'm going more on the all night, rage tweeting.
Yeah.
That is like, any other time, this is called sundowning, and we come in and start giving you meds, put grandpa out so he gets a night of sleep.
Right.
Little clonidine, something.
I mean,
take the edge off.
He has to be on some type of like medication, right?
They've got him probably pumped to the gills with Provigil, another couple of Alzheimer's drugs, which is why when they wear off, it's just all of a sudden he's just crashes and he's out.
Right.
He's allegedly been on these European Sudafeds for like years, like, because I guess in Europe they still have like the real deal Sudafed, and it's been a rumor that's where some of his pep comes from.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a what we would know as a real.
It's basically it's a legal form of amphetamine. So.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow.
I mean, this is, like I said, this is like whispers and rumors and stuff like that. But there's been reports.
I mean, there were a lot of whispers and rumors about, Biden, right? And they didn't care. I mean, so I mean, I see Biden walking around like he's healthy, around you. So,
yeah. I mean, that's the problem with Biden is that, he was like the one hoss shay with Dinesh. It's like, you are in perfect health until your 100th birthday, and then you fall apart and turn into dust on that 100th day. And that was sort of Biden. I mean, he was like healthy, and then bam, and they were able to hide a lot of it, which the more I find out about that, the angrier I get that they did hide it, when if they hadn't, maybe we stood a chance to, get the candidate that could win. And I'm not saying it couldn't have been Harris, but at least she would have had time to put together a proper campaign.
Yeah, correct. There could have been the process to, very similar to my argument earlier about like, look at the alternative. We have a system where it's all or nothing. So there's no like part of my candidate won or part of my candidate's party. I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying that makes it like it's win or lose. So.
And Biden, though, it goes back to that hubris again, that sort of benevolent hubris. Like, I'm the only one that can help. I'm the only one that can do this. And then, he's got Jill and Hunter behind him telling him the same thing. And Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, and stuff like that. But I think that on the dementia issue, like, I've heard and experienced, my grandfather had Alzheimer's, that it makes you more of yourself, like in a lot of ways. So if you were a person who was, calm and measured and pretty chill, you can still kind of be chill. If you're somebody that was more controlling or anxious or, maybe mean, you're going to get a lot more of that. And I feel like that's why we kind of see this like opposite presentations where Biden sort of slowed down, got more demure, and Trump just is aggressive and out of control and weird and off the handle, which is kind of just himself, but on steroids.
Yeah, it's in neuroscience terms, the frontal and behavioral inhibitors come off.
There you go.
It's called no filters.
No filters.
Is that what I mean? Yeah, in layman's term, no filters. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, in layman's terms. Yeah. Well, guys, we're running up on an hour here, so let's go around. We're coming up on the 4th of July weekend. Anything special you see happening, or anything special you're doing for yourself, Christine?
Yeah.
Nothing special. I have a new dog, and he doesn't like the thunder, so I don't think he's gonna like fireworks. So I'm probably gonna like turn on the faucets and the fans and put on the TV.
There you go.
What about you, Louis?
No, same here. I had two things. One is I have seen a lot of reports of celebrations being canceled because of ICE raids and fear of things happening. So there's quite a few across California, LA County. So that's disappointing, but with all that said, it's still a holiday and there's still a lot to celebrate. So that's what we're going to do as a family. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Same for me. It's like, I'm actually, going to be doing my, some golf then. I'm sure that, bovine meat will be seared on the grill at some point.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. How are the dogs, by the way? Are they good?
Oh yeah.
Good, great.
So anyway, that's all I've got to say. Anything else you want to add?
No, I will add one more thing. Keep your eye on the news about this bill, because if they do make their deadline of this week, which I'm 50-50 on whether or not they're going to make the July 5th deadline, but it's going to be a whole new world after this week if they do.
Okay, well, that gives us something to talk about next Monday.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Hey, for everybody that is seeing this, we thank you. I've been finding out people have been not watching this live, but they come in and they are watching it. Afterwards, in the days after we put this up, and I really appreciate you doing that. So for everybody that sees this, thank you. Have a great 4th of July. And we'll come back next Monday and see where we are in the world. So until
Exactly.
and we're off.